All right. I think we are live and ready to go. I see Core Break in the chat. What's up, Core? Hit me with the hydrate and stretch preemptively. I appreciate that. Iconics here. What's up? Let me flip over to the tier list layout and we'll go ahead and get started. Unmute that. We'll have the BGM going. We'll be running through the regular BGM playlist with the recently released BGM stuff that's been added to the list. And I did want to show off something kind of different for you folks as kind of a little bonus for what we're doing today. So let me pause this, and the stream layout should be showing the tracks we're playing. But before we jump into everything, I want to show off two tracks here. I won't play the full things. I'll just do like one repeat and then we'll switch. And this is kind of a premiere. So for you folks that have stopped by, you're getting a sneak peek at something that's not out yet technically. So let me play the first one. Boost the volume a little bit so you can hear it. So what you should be able to hear on the audio right now is a new version of the very first BGM track I ever did. This is Under the Ground, but it's been re-recorded and redone from the ground up using the loop. And it's been recorded at a much higher quality since the first one was done with really kind of like a hack job edit. This is actually done using the loop, and we did talk about this on stream. It was a while back. But it sounds much cleaner. The bass is cleaner, and it's got a tempo switch up in the middle. And then that's essentially the repeat. And then the other one is a completely redone, re-recorded version of the second BGM track from the original pack, Super Bossa Nova. This one is not dramatically different from the first version. It doesn't have any big switches, but it is much more consistent and clean because this one was done again from the ground up using the loop. It's a little slower too, I think. And so you might be wondering, why are there two different mixes of two songs that have already been released? And this is something I've talked about a little bit before. Again, you guys are getting a bit of a sneak peek on something that's currently cooking. And it's not really ready to be talked about yet, but I'm in the process of getting my music uploaded to Spotify. I'm going to get everything on there first as a streaming platform service, but as part of that, I wanted to redo these first two BGM tracks and get their quality up and get them a little bit cleaner. And in the process, I actually redid the sound on the entire first BGM pack. You'll see as the BGM cycles, if something says SB mix, it means it's been redone. If it says SB remaster, it means I've redone the audio and fixed the volume a little bit. And the first pack with all these redone tracks is going to be on Spotify. It's currently processing. I don't know when it's going to be live, but I'll definitely be posting when it is. And Core asks, are you going to be on Tidal too? I have the ability to do that. I want to get everything on Spotify first and use that as a test run for the quality levels and everything. And if it looks good, then I should be able to edit my distribution options and put it on Tidal as well. The problem with putting things on like Amazon and iTunes is that it makes you have a minimum price, and I want these things to be free. So once the BGM tracks are loaded and everything looks good, I'll dump the rest of the stuff on Spotify. And if anyone is streaming or needs to use my tracks rather than have to go and download them or play them off of YouTube at a compressed quality, they can play them straight off of a streaming program like Spotify. And then if I add Tidal later, I'll let you folks know. But that'll be one accessible way to get at the songs and not have to, go to another source. And if you're a streamer and you're playing them from Spotify, there's no DMCA or anything like that. You should never get claimed for anything that I make on the BGM side. And so that's something I've been working on in the last week. I will tweet about the results once everything's done. Let's drop this back down. But yeah, that is a preview of things to come. I'm pretty excited about getting stuff over on a streaming platform, and then once that's successfully gone through, I'll probably release just a single on Bandcamp. That's the remastered stuff. It'll be really simple. It'll just be like remastered tracks, and I'll put the 2 new ones for Under the Ground and Super Bossa Nova just up there live, and if people want to grab those, they can. Or I might just, I don't know if I'll do the whole album. Maybe I'll do a remastered version of the first BGM collection. I gotta think about that. But I will definitely let people know when that stuff happens. And I see Core has redeemed a drop a beat redeem. All right. Very well. Let me get this paused. And let's see what we got. I'll have to freestyle something out of thin air, but I'll do my best. Let's do it. All right, let us turn the BGM back on. And let's see what we're doing for the actual tier list today. What I have on screen now is something we worked on several weeks ago now. And this is a Monster Hunter Creatures tier list. And last time I did this was a long session. It was almost 4 hours. But we didn't do the whole thing. I think I lasted till right about here. And I said, we're going to do this in a later session because I don't think Sunbreak had come out when I did this before. And I said, in order to have kind of an accurate opinion on things, I want to actually wait till the game comes out so I can hunt the new monsters and have an opinion on the new ones. And they're all here down at the bottom, starting with Espinas. And these are ones that were added in the new expansion. And now that I've fought pretty much everything, there's one other fight up here that I've not done since it's a very, very late game. But now I've essentially encountered all the new stuff, minus the one, and I'll be able to talk about them. And it is interesting. We have, maybe I can rearrange this a little bit for ease of coverage here. We have the Rise stuff and then we have the World stuff. So I'm going to put the Rise stuff together. This is base Rise, expansion for Sunbreak, and then I don't have to jump between games. We'll do it like that. There's a couple more left on this tier, and then you can tell the graphic style switches, and that's the Monster Hunter Rise entries. And it includes old monsters and ones that are unique to that game. So there'll be stuff we haven't talked about that are returning ones from older games, but they're all covered in that title. Just that's the way it's organized here, which is fine. And credits once again go to James Rainford1 on Twitter. James was nice enough to update the original tier list with the Sunbreak entries since that game has come out. So we'll go ahead and rank from the top. Again, top ranking is S. The top of the tier itself is far to the left, and then it goes down to the right, and then descending accordingly. So first of the next batch, we have a monster that is from, I believe, 3rd generation, maybe in portable 3rd. This is Nibblesnarf. And Nibblesnarf is considered a Leviathan, which are usually the kind of water or aquatic, long-bodied, almost serpent-like creatures in Monster Hunter. And it's basically a big sand fish. It has a big flat head, almost shaped kind of like a halibut or flounder. And it lives in the desert, spends its time swimming through the dunes, and kind of operates almost on shark mechanics in that it tries to bite you, and it dives under the sand and will try and come up at your feet. It can expel big bursts of sand through its gills, and it's kind of a unique fight. It has an interesting mechanic where if you drop bombs, barrel bombs on the field and lure it into its path, it'll eat the bombs and then explode and get popped out of the ground. So you can kind of fish it out and then get free hits. Aside from its name being kind of goofy, Nibblesnarf is alright. I'd say not quite as iconic as Gobel, the big pufferfish with the lantern. We're going to put Gobel or Nibblesnarf high C tier. And again, to recap what we did in the previous rating stream for the monsters, the criteria are design and hunt. So how good of an experience is it to hunt these monsters, and how cool are they looking? This does not factor in their gear. Obviously, some monsters are going to have much better equipment, weapons, armor, and whatnot than others. So that's not a factor here. Instead, it's purely aesthetic design and the gameplay experience of hunting these creatures. So yeah, we'll put Nibblesnarf up here on high C tier. Pretty unique monster and pretty fun to fight. Next up, we have Great Macau, and this is the larger version. The minion version down here is over here on this tier. Great Macau is essentially the first beginner level target of Monster Hunter Generations. Kind of like other ones we've seen and talked about in the list here, like the Dromes, the large raptor type creatures, which are here actually, or Great Roggy, Great Baggy, Great Jaggy. They're essentially dinosaur raptor like monsters, but they're beginning targets. They're meant to be really basic, simple creatures that you fight, and you kind of learn the ropes through these targets. And the equivalent in Generations is Macau. And this one's noteworthy for a couple reasons. Design-wise, it's kind of like a feathered kangaroo raptor. It's got a really vibrant, bright color scheme. Oh, I see Iconic's going to go eat. All right, dude. I will probably be doing this for a while. Hopefully not as long as last time. And attack-wise, Great Macau can kind of flip onto its tail, and it's very acrobatic and quick. And it surprised a lot of people in Generations because everyone's used to those entry-level targets being just punching bags and pushovers. This one actually is dangerous. If you're not paying attention, it's very quick, and its acrobatic nature can cover the entire arena you're fighting in very quickly. And so it's not a trivial fight, and it surprised a lot of people because, again, definitely more of a contender than others. And it is a cool design, so I'm going to put Macau up here on B tier after Great Jaggy. Definitely one of the more challenging entry-level fights, and I think it's interesting that they do that every once in a while just to keep people on their toes. So that'll go there. One sec. Now, if we go down the list, we have, this is regular Lao Shanlong? I believe so. I think the way this thing was ordered, and it was kind of grouped in a weird way, this Elder Dragon subspecies showed up earlier, and I said we'd get to the regular base version later, so that's what it is down here. So Lao Shanlong is a large-scale Elder Dragon from the older games. I want to say Monster Hunter 1 or 2 introduced this one. It was definitely not a game I played since I started with Freedom Unite, but it is a large, wingless Elder Dragon that's very, very big. It's as big as a house and as long as several of them. And you fight this creature in a big sort of rocky canyon. I kind of broke down the fight before, but I'll recap it here. You basically follow it as it lumbers through a canyon, and you drop rocks on it, and you kind of whack on it like a siege fight, similar to Zora Magdaros in World, but it's not really that dynamic. You're just walking alongside this big plotting dragon and smacking it a bunch. And then when it gets to the end, you sort of fight it in a contained area. They remix this fight a little bit later, and you kind of fight it at the gates of a castle, and you can kind of climb up stuff and fight it. It's not bad, but it's a very archaic fight. They could definitely do some retooling if they were to bring this monster back and then, make it a lot more dynamic. But it's kind of one of the old school monsters. We'll put Loud down here on B tier. Design-wise, it's a big red dragon, kind of similar to Safi Jiva from Iceborne, but it doesn't have wings, and it's a lot more of a standard Western dragon shape. Next up, we have one of the last holdovers from the old generation. We have Yamatsukami. This one also came from the earlier games. I first fought this one in Monster Hunter Freedom Unite. It is kind of an endgame target. This is an Elder Dragon as well, but very unique in design. Yamatsukami looks like a big flying Cthulhu balloon. It's got kind of a spherical body that's shaped almost like a big mountain. It's got moss and stuff growing on it, and it's got tons of tentacle arms and a giant maw full of unsettlingly human-looking teeth. Unlike the other quote-unquote Elder Dragons, which are sometimes dragon-shaped, sometimes not, Yamatsukami is very kind of Lovecraftian looking. It's pretty unique. You fight it in a unique tower map. It's like an arena that you just fight this monster, and it's gigantic. And you do things like fight it in different phases, try not to get knocked off the tower, and then try and knock it out of the sky because it sort of floats. Again, Cthulhu balloon. It's an interesting fight. Hey, what's up, Red Dragon? Welcome to the stream, and I hope you are doing well today. Hope you're feeling better. Now, speaking of Yama, it's a neat fight, but it's definitely another archaic one. Maybe a little bit less so than Lao, but it's such a cool design. This Elder Dragon's neat, so I'm going to put you further up here. How about above the crabs? Hey, Edward's here. Edward says, I haven't heard anything yet, but I disagree. That's fine. We're talking about monsters. So there's no such thing as a correct opinion. I haven't even gotten to my favorite yet. It is buried elsewhere in the list. My drink says, doing okay, thanks. You? I'm good. It was a fairly uneventful day at work. I had to leave early to take care of some errands and pick up some stuff and go grocery shopping. And boy, am I not used to seeing inflation-based prices at the grocery store. I think I talked about this before with you folks, but I go grocery shopping maybe every other week or so. I buy enough food that I can cook stuff and have enough to eat, and then I go shopping, every other week. As a result, sometimes I have to buy larger loads of groceries since it's been almost 2 weeks. And before inflation and things really started to, tick up here as it is everywhere else in the world, usually I get by maybe about $100 grocery bill if I bought like a lot of stuff because I'm completely out of food, right? That's about average. Today, I'd say I had maybe slightly more than average load of groceries I picked up, so it's out of a lot of stuff. A lot of basic things, foodstuffs, non-foodstuffs, etc. My grocery bill is almost $250 today, and that is steep. I didn't buy anything super expensive. I just had a lot of stuff I had to stock up on. I saw that and I was like, all right, well, good thing I don't go grocery shopping weekly. But yeah, it's expensive. Red Dragon says I go shopping monthly. No, there's nothing wrong with that. It depends on what I'm cooking. Sometimes, because I don't like to stock up on stuff in large quantities, more than I can use in a week, because I don't like to waste things. So I have to plan out what I'm going to cook and then buy that stuff the week of. And then a lot of stuff, obviously, is stuff I don't need to buy frequently. I was just out of a lot of things this last time. But yeah, steep grocery bill. But I understand it's like that everywhere. It's just the way everything is with the economy, global economy and everything. All right. Next up, we are getting into Monster Hunter Rise. This is going to be base Rise plus Sunbreak. And so there's going to be monsters here that are new, and there'll be monsters here that are returning, that have not been elsewhere in the list, which is kind of good that they don't overlap. That makes it easier. And the first one is Aknosom, newcomer to the series with Monster Hunter Rise. Aknosom is a bird wyvern and is an early game target. And a common thread through the new entries in Rise is they're based off of Japanese yokai-inspired designs. And Aknosom is inspired by the Japanese umbrella demon. I forget what it's called. But it's a kind of crane-looking monster with a big frilled crest and these kind of large, sharp-feathered wings. And it's got a really neat design, and the fight is pretty noteworthy too. It's, again, early game target normally, not super difficult, but towards the later part of the game when you go back and fight this thing again at higher difficulty levels, it is dangerous. But the memorability and design are definitely something that goes a long way. So I'm going to put Aknosom up here on B tier. Cool monster. I like its red and kind of red, orange, and white color scheme. Next up, we have another newcomer to Monster Hunter that started with Rise. We've got Almudron. Almudron is a Leviathan. It is not an aquatic Leviathan. It is essentially a giant mud weasel. I've hunted this thing many times on stream, so if you've ever watched me play Monster Hunter Live, you've seen me fight Almudron. It's a thing that I need a bunch of high-end parts in order to make some stuff from its bits. And Almudron's cool. I like its design. Its fight is a little bit obnoxious because it spends a lot of time partially submerged in the ground and smacking you with its tail and flinging mud everywhere, but it's pretty unique. It's a dynamic fight that it doesn't really have an equivalent in the series so far. So I'm going to put Almudron up on B tier. I like its design more than its fight, but it is still a solid entry. I'll put you a little bit further down below Shrouded Nursula. Next up, we have the Apex monsters. The Apex monsters are unique to Base Rise, and these are sort of ahead of the other pack in a group. We'll just do them all at once. In Base Rise, when you get to the end game, you fight these sort of corrupted or superpowered versions of existing monsters in the game, and you get certain bits that are used to make different pieces of weapons. Customized weapon gear they call rampage weapons. That all comes from the Apex creatures. And they're not bad. I think they're an okay endgame mechanic, but not too compelling because they're not dramatically different. So they get some new attacks and they're overall more difficult. But all of the Apexes, I'm going to do these in a group because they all function kind of similarly. And I'd rather spend more time talking about the base monsters that they come from than these sort of special species. And the Apex species are unique to Rise, but are very similar to the Hyper monsters and something we'll see. It's not on the list, but it's part of the mechanics in Sunbreak. So I'm going to put all of the Apexes on mid C tier. Arzuros, probably in the middle. This is the bear. We'll talk about Yogi in a second. The Apex version is definitely more dangerous. If you're not careful, the thing will knock you out. But it's not super noteworthy of a fight. It's just harder hitting. Diablos, likewise, pretty dangerous. I think it's a slightly more interesting fight. I'll go a little bit higher. Apex Mizutsune takes some aspects of its Generations Ultimate Deviant Soul Seer. That's a pretty cool fight. So I'm going to put you further up. Still difficult, but its bubbles get this kind of like Foxfire ability. Apex Rathalos, very similar to Dread King, the deviant from Generations and Generations Ultimate. Also pretty okay. I'll put you on C tier. Apex Rathian is like the counterpart to Dread Queen from the same Generations Generation Ultimate series. More poison attacks. You can put down hazards on the ground. Okay. The other thing that keeps these Apex species from being super high up on the list is that their design doesn't really change too much. They have sort of like this corrupted pattern and glowing bits, but they're not like a different model. They're not a different element. They're not super distinct, unlike the Deviants. Hey, Waz is here. Waz says, boo, these opinions suck. Well, that's definitely an opinion, Wazzy. Feel free to create your own tier list for Monster Hunter, a series you don't play. I'm sure you'd have quite a bit to say on all these creatures that you've never seen before. And the last Apex is Zinogre. Very similar to Thunderlord. That is a difficult fight. It's probably the hardest of the Deviant or Apex species. I'll go second place there. This mechanic was unique to Base Rise. The Apexes don't come back in Sunbreak. Instead, we have a different version of the endgame monsters, which I think is implemented much better. It's similar, but not the same type of, here's a super version of the creature, and not restricted to rampages. So they didn't bring back this Apex mechanic. They just sort of evolved it into something I think is more interesting for the endgame. And there's no rampages in Sunbreak, so the whole sort of idea got obsoleted. But it is in there in the base game. You can encounter these high-level targets if you're playing Base Rise, and they're still difficult. Okay, that should be it for Apexes. Now we can talk about the regular versions of all these creatures, old and new. I'll have a bit more to say after clearing those out of the list. First one is the regular version of the Angry Bear. This is Arzuros, or Yogi, as we call him sometimes. And Arzuros is a fanged beast. It is a large, mostly bipedal or quadrupedal bear-like creature with these heavy armored forearms. And Arzuros attacks by swiping at you. If you're not careful, it'll grab you and sort of shake you like a Polaroid picture, and then sit down and eat honey. Like any bear-based creature, it's a very big fan of honey. And Arzuros was introduced in 3rd generation in Portable 3rd, I believe, as an early game target. This was the first one of the bear body type creatures, and not too difficult in all its incarnations. Its deviant was a whole nother story, but Arzuros has a lot of kind of charm. It's big, sort of lumbering, lazy bear. I want to put you up on C tier. I like Arzuros. Good early game target, teaching people about how to read monster movement and dodge and whatnot without being a big difficulty wall. All right, what do we have next? I was just looking at the BGM list. For those that just jumped on in the last several minutes and missed the earlier part of the stream, you're going to see some remixed versions of my BGM tracks showing up in the list as it just cycles through random. I re-recorded Under the Ground and Super Bossa Nova from the first collection, and then re-recorded the rest of the tracks from the first one. I fixed some stuff with audio on the other ones, but the first two were done completely from the ground up using the loop. And the reason why I did that is because, and this is what I was talking about with some folks that were on beginning, the first release on Spotify, once everything goes through, is going to be a slightly remastered version of that BGM pack, the first one. And I'll have 2 new tracks, including this one that's playing now, and then Super Bossa Nova, and then the remastered versions of everything after that. And so this is the first time I'm demoing these new ones. So you folks are getting a sneak peek of the upcoming Spotify stuff. All right. Next up, we have a flying wyvern. We have Basarios. Basarios is, in the older games, considered a juvenile form of Gravios, which is the big rock wyvern that spits fire. It seems like they've kind of retconned that and just made Basarios a different cousin species in Rise. But this thing is got a big sort of, looks like a mountain, and it can burrow underground, run you over, and it can spit fire just like its larger cousin. Gravios is over here. Basarios is an okay fight. In Rise, they gave it this ability where you have to wait till it sort of heats up parts of its body or you'll bounce off of it. It's okay. I think it looks kind of cool, but it's kind of a mid monster to me. It's always been a mid monster, and the fight's not super interesting. They give it some new tricks and switch up the formula, but it's still kind of a pretty nondescript creature, so we're going to put here in the middle of C. Not a bad fight, but nothing to really write home about. If they were to bring back Gravios and make its fight a lot more interesting, I think it would probably push this one up further, because I do like this one's design. It's just, this fight's even more boring. Next up, we have another newcomer to Rise. This is Bishaten. And Bishaten is a fanged beast, and its body type is kind of like it's got wings and can fly. It's kind of like a feathered baboon type creature with a big and a prehensile tail that it can use to balance around on. And its design is inspired by Japanese Tengu, I believe. It's very, very Tengu-esque. And Bishaten is very agile. It flips all over the place and does kind of like breakdancing moves. And it'll pull out these different types of persimmons from a convenient pouch somewhere on its body. And it'll just wing these persimmons at you like projectiles. And some of them will poison, some will paralyze. And it's got all this arsenal of hidden fruit that it'll just throw at you. Kind of an early game target too, like Acnesom. But decently challenging. I like Bishaten. It's got a lot of personality, even though it's not too difficult of a fight. So we're going to put you up on B tier under Mudboy. Interesting monster. We'll get to its subspecies a little bit later. Next up, we have another Elder Dragon that is from the older games. I want to say second or first generation. We have Chameleos. Chameleos, is its name might suggest, is a kind of chameleon-esque Elder Dragon. It's got wings and a big sort of coiled tail, a horn, and a really long, stretchy tongue that it likes to whip about. And it'll use its tongue to steal things from you. In the old games, it would straight up steal your items. Hey, Sourlad's here. What's up, Sourlad? How you doing today? Hope your afternoon, evening is going well. We're attempting to finish this massive Monster Hunter tier list, so welcome. And another gimmick for Chameleos is it can turn invisible. It uses a type of mist that it sprays around to refract light, and it can cloak as a result and make itself invisible as it moves around and ambush. It's a neat monster, a very dynamic fight. The way they've retooled it in Rise is still very fun. It can be dangerous if you're not paying attention. It's got a lot of personality. And while in the old games it'd straight up steal your inventory items, in Rise and Sunbreak it'll steal your bird buffs, little spear of birds you get from wandering around the map. I believe it steals that first and gets the buffs applied to itself, and if it takes them all off you, then it can steal your items. I've never seen it happen, but supposedly that's what it does. But Chameleos is cool. I like this monster. Not part of the evaluation criteria here, but its theme is also really, really cool. The Rise version of Chameleos' theme is very, very well done. It sounds like this kind of mischievous jungle theme, and then it's got a big switch up where it brings in this huge sort of orchestral chorus section, and the whole thing just goes up to 11. Really, really cool monster theme. Next up, we have a variant. This is a variant of an Elder Dragon, which is something rare. There are not a lot of those in the series so far. In fact, there's probably only been a couple. This is Crimson Glow Valstrax, variant of the original Valstrax, which is up here on S tier. And Crimson Glow is unique to Rise. It is the same monster, but it's got a slightly different model. It's been sort of reworked in the current generation. Crimson Glow looks a little bit sleeker, and its parts are a little bit different, but it's more or less a Valstrax that's been kind of corrupted by Dragon Energy. And while I do like the original Valstrax a lot, it's up here on S tier for a reason. The Crimson Glow version takes all of the things that made the jet-powered dragon cool and cranks them up into overdrive. It still maintains the high speed and is flying all over the map. I've hunted this one once briefly on stream at Pink to show the fight off a little before we got murdered. But I'll be definitely doing this one in the future since it's got a master rank version. But Crimson Glow is a really intense fight. It has a bunch of tricks that involve flying all over the place. It can use its wings to shoot dragon energy projectiles. It can straight up do like a Kamehameha mega beam that nukes everything. They'll do the ambush where it blasts off in outer space and then dive bombs everything for a big explosive effect. It's basically the original fight, even more so. And Crimson Glow is awesome. Looks cool. Super dynamic fight. Neat monster. One of the best. Moving on. We have another old school monster from the older games that has made an appearance in most of them. Not every single game. But this is Diablos. Diablos is a flying type wyvern. It is known for its two big curved horns, hence its name, and usually found in drier, desert-like environments. And Diablos attacks by trying to run you over. It's a big fan of just charging like a bull. It can burrow into the sand and come up underneath its targets, and is pretty quick and speedy. This monster has retained a lot of its core gimmicks from the older games, and it hasn't really changed a whole lot. They give it some minor tweaks when it comes back, but I do like Diablos. We're gonna put you on B tier. I'll put you above Baroth. think we'll see its subspecies down in the Rise Iceborne tier. Where is it? I'm trying to think if I ranked it already. Ah, there's Black Diablos. Yeah, we'll get to you later. All right, moving on. We have another newcomer from Monster Hunter Rise. This one debuted in the base game. This is a fanged beast. This is Gosharag. Gosharag is one of the coolest monsters to be introduced this generation. It is based on that one Oni type Japanese demon, the one that has like a red and blue counterpart. I forget its name off the top of my head, but it's one of the bear types. Similar body type to Arzuros and Logombi, which we'll see down here, and Volvidon. Starlight asks, how many monsters are there? If you count small monsters and every monster in the series as it's a standalone species, dozens, lots. This is a really comprehensive list and more or less has, I think, pretty much everything in the mainline series of games. But this list includes nothing from the MMOs for Monster Hunter. So Monster Hunter Frontier, which was only out in Asia and ran for, I think, over a decade, has a lot of these creatures and a whole bunch of unique ones that have never shown up in other games except for 3. Lavasioth, the lava fish, Hypnok, the sleep peacock over here, and Espinas, who showed up in Sunbreak. So there's another couple dozen creatures unique to Frontier that aren't on this list. I can't really rank those because I've never played Frontier. I've only watched videos. So if I wanted to rate them, it wouldn't necessarily be an accurate tier list. But yeah, there's a lot. And then there's also the spin-off games. There's mobile unique titles. There's probably, in grand total, hundreds of monsters across the franchise. There's a lot. But what we're ranking here are ones I can talk about, which is why it's taken probably, in total, since we did like almost 4 hours, but in the last stream, it's going to be about 6 hours. Hey, Iconic's back from dinner. Welcome back. I hope you had a good dinner. But going back to Gosharag here. So this is a bear-type monster. Big, hulking, furred creature. Looks very much like the Oni. Let me see if I can look up what that's called. What that's based off of. It's a pretty cool mythological creature in Japanese lore. Namahage, that's right. If you look up Namahage, which I guess I can do here. Let me do this. Make sure I don't look up the wrong thing. Yeah, here we go. Namahage looks like this. There's a big sort of hulking, like fur-covered demon creature. And there's a red version and a blue version I've seen, but they're part of like ceremonial festivals and stuff in Japanese lore. Really cool, really iconic creature in mythology for Japan. And so Gosharag is based on that. The creature itself, it's, again, bear type. It's big, towers over the hunter, and has this coat of fur and these heavily armored forearms, kind of like Arzuros, but they're covered in like a spiky hide. And when you make Gosharag mad, this is an ice type creature. It'll spit really cold ice energy, I guess, at you. But when you make it mad, it'll freeze its arms. And it'll essentially cover them in like a frozen substance. And it'll create either blades on its arms or big bludgeoning instruments. So it creates weaponry to fight you when it gets mad. And it'll either be dodging like dual blades, like a great sword, or a big hammer type weapon that are on its arms. You have to break them off in order to knock it over. Very cool monster. This one's gonna go near the top of A tier. I like Gosharag a lot. I'm gonna put you up here next to Tigrex. Very neat monster. Next up, we have the entry-level raptor target for Rise, equivalent to your Great Baggies, Great Jaggies. This is Great Izuchi. Great Izuchi, lore-wise, I believe, is based off of the Kama Itachi, the Wind Weasel. I believe it's inspiration yokai for this one. And it's a small, kind of fuzzy raptor creature that has a really sharp-bladed tail. And kind of like the other Great Blanks, Izuchi hunts in a pack with its minions, and it has a couple moves that it will do where when it attacks, it has its minions attack at once. So it's generally a good idea to clear out the fodder unless you want to deal with a bunch of targets at once. This one is a bit more dynamic in fight than some of the other kind of punching bag targets. I'm going to put Izuchi up here on B tier. I'll put you below Bisha 10. It's a cool monster. It's an early game target, so not super difficult. But I do like its patterning and its overall design. And it's not boring. If you're not careful, that thing will cart you, especially on Master Rank. Moving right along, we have a newcomer from the 5th generation of Monster Hunter that showed up for the first time in World. And it's up here in the Rise group because it was also a target in Rise. And I see Red Dragon has redeemed Small Raku. Alright. Let me... turn that on here. Let me do this. Where's VTube Studio? I'm going to go on top of the desk. Let me turn the timer on. And hopefully I don't forget to turn it off. So going back to Juratotus, this is a Piscine wyvern. And as a result, it has a lot of fish-like traits shared with things like Lavasioth, which we'll see down here, Plesioth, which we had further up. And it's a big mudfish. Juratotus spends its time in swamp-type areas. It will cover its body in mud, kind of like Baroth, as armor, and will spit mud at you and kind of try and tackle you, run you over. And honestly, this was one of the most boring fights in the entirety of the series in World. Juratotus in World was a target you fight early game. When you get introduced to the desert locale, which is like a desert swamp type area, that's where you fight this target in World. And it pretty much just sits there. It's a punching bag. Not interesting at all. Someone working on the Rise team must have heard a lot of the chatter and or was a big fan of this creature because they gave this thing a serious overhaul in Rise. Not only was it moved to be a high rank target, it's one of the high rank urgents, but they completely changed the dynamics of this fight. They made Juratotus into an actual threat. And it used to just be, again, something you just beat on, get its bits, and move on. It's actually pretty dangerous at the upper tiers of difficulty in Rise. And I believe I fought this thing in Master Rank maybe once. But one of the things they added right away is it has a roar. The World version did not have a roar. It could not stun you just by getting mad. They also dialed its speed up incredibly high in Rise. And it spends a lot of time getting out of the mud, and it'll run around, kind of dodge and spit things at you, and it moves very, very fast. And so I thought that was a really, really good change for this creature that was, again, very boring, a slog of a fight. And as a result, it's a lot more dangerous. So World version of Juratotus, I would have probably ranked low C, maybe down here. Taking into account the current version of the fight in Rise, I'm going to put Juratotus up here on B tier. Design-wise, it's fine. It's a big mudfish. No, the fact that the fight is so much more interesting, I think, is noteworthy. That's enough to break this one into the B tier. And I think it's really interesting how the Monster Hunter development team will do things like this, where they'll take a fight and they'll rework it or they'll retool it and make it completely different. Usually, in most cases, improving it. I think that's great for the games. There's another one on the list that we'll talk about. And I know I've spoken about on stream before down here. We'll get to you in a sec. Next up, we've got a very well-known, somewhat notorious monster from the older games that also came back in Base Rise. This is Khezu. Khezu is a sightless flying wyvern and has some kind of lamprey, leech-like design elements. And it's a big, stretchy penis monster. Carries the thunder element, so it's able to use electricity. Sarlad says, be right back. Alright. I will be here. A lot of the notoriety from Khezu comes from the fact that it's pretty gross looking. It has a long, stretchy neck, hence the comparison to a wiener. It'll use that long, stretchy neck to whip all over the place, and it can hang from the ceiling and snare you. People don't like this monster, probably because it's so gross and weird. I think it's an interesting departure from everything else in the franchise, which is some sort of raptor, dragon, wyvern, later on bears and more mammal-type creatures. But there's not a whole lot that looks like Khezu. We did talk about Giganox, which is a more interesting cousin of Khezu, in my opinion. I know that's Pink's favorite monster, but this one, honestly, it's not bad. I'm going to put Khezu up here on C tier. This was the monster that taught me how to play Monster Hunter in Freedom Unite. And it was a result of my choosing a main weapon. So it does have a little bit of nostalgia for me, but I can appreciate a really different design. It has no theme. It's the only monster in the game that is completely silent when you fight it. As far as the ambient noise, there's no music because Khezu's blind. It needs to be able to hear in order to find its target. So sight and smell. As a result, there's no background track when you fight it, which is kind of a unique thing for this monster. Moving on, we have another 5th generation monster that debuted in World. This is Kulu-Ya-Ku. And Kulu-Ya-Ku's a bird wyvern, early game target you fight in the desert regions. And it's this big sort of ostrich-like raptor. And it's a big fan of stealing eggs and eating them. And is pretty much a low tier difficulty target. Kulu-Ya-Ku's not too difficult. When you fight it, it'll sort of try and swat you. Alright, thanks for the reminder, Iconic. Turn this off. It will return to regular size. And so you fight Kulu-Ya-Ku. It's kind of a pushover. It'll try and slap you around, but it's really not that difficult. And then when it gets mad, it'll stop and try and dig up something at its feet. It can be a rock, it could be like a piece of pottery, or some random object they'll dig up and hold in its hands. And once it does that, this thing grows a big pair because it gets very, very brave and very aggressive. Once the bird picks up an object as a weapon, then it decides to throw down because it'll use that weapon to block your hits. It'll jump and bludgeon you over the head with it and gets a lot more dangerous. It's an interesting idea, and at the upper levels of difficulty, this thing can kill you because it does hit hard once it picks up a rock or a weapon. And if you hit it enough, it'll drop it, and then it'll sort of revert back to its regular moveset. But the idea that this sort of goofy bird is sort of not really a threat, and then when it grabs a weapon, it suddenly goes into I'm going to kill you mode is pretty funny. It's got a lot of personality. So I'm going to put Kulu-Ya-Ku up here on low B tier. I'll put you over here above. Put you below Duratotus. Even with the I'm going to kill you mentality with a weapon, it's still not too difficult of a fight. Master rank, you have to be careful. It'll one-shot you if you're not paying attention. But not bad. Good early game target. All right. Moving on, we have a monster that goes back to second generation, I believe. This was the flagship of DOS, Monster Hunter 2, I believe. This is Kushala Daora. And Kushala Daora is an Elder Dragon. I've been fighting this thing off and on stream. This is the big metallic wind dragon. And Kushala has had a really interesting arc. I wanted to talk about this on stream just because I got a lot to say about this monster. From its design perspective, it's one of my favorites in the entire series. It's got these sort of steel scales, so the whole thing looks like it's made of metal. And it's very shiny and reflective. And I do like that whole design. It's kind of unique. The fight against Kushala, the hunt, has gone through quite a few iterations, and that's what I wanted to talk about here. So where would I place Kushala? If it was purely based on design, it'd be an S tier monster. Based on the hunt, I'm going to put it in high A tier. I'm going to put it above Lucent. Lucent is cool, but I'm going to put you here. This would probably change the spot after the update coming this month when they add this monster into the roster after not being there since Generation 3. But we're going to put Kushala here. This is probably a controversial pick, but I love the design of this monster so much. The reason why it's not S tier based on its hunt is because in World and Iceborne, which this monster did appear in that series of games, this fight was insufferable in World and Iceborne. Prior to that, I thought Kushala's fight was pretty good. Above average. It would fight you by staying on the ground and occasionally going in the air to conjure tornadoes and fly around. And it was a pretty good mix. You would combat its wind ability by poisoning it to get rid of its wind barrier. And it was a pretty dynamic but interesting fight in the older games. So pre-Generation 5, I had no problem with Kushala's fight, and again, looked awesome. In World and Iceborne, somebody on the development team said, this monster needs to spend most of its time in the air, and it needs to spend most of its time summoning tornadoes that stay on the map for a really long time. And so the fight was incredibly annoying in World and Iceborne. In World, you could kind of flash bomb spam Kushala out of the air and lock it down and then just beat on it to get around the tornadoes. But on Master Rank, they gave it a resistance to flash bombs, and they gave it even more annoying abilities. So you might drop into a fight with some other people that are fighting this particular monster in Iceborne, and there's just tornadoes everywhere, and they knock you over. You can't do anything other than try and dodge them. And in addition to that, the monster would just never be on the ground. So if you weren't using range, you'd have to find a way to either knock it out of the sky or get it down to the ground so you can hit it. Very annoying. I think everybody thought this fight absolutely blew, pun intended, in World and Iceborne. In Rise, they retooled the fight again, and they made it much better. I've said this on stream when I've been fighting this monster. It spends a lot more time on the ground, and it does go airborne to shoot blasts of wind and conjure tornadoes that move like a projectile and then leave. There's only one attack it does that stays for a little bit and then goes away. So it doesn't spend the time creating hazards. And so it's a bit of a mixed bag across all the games, but overall, I'd say Kushala is a good monster, the well-designed fight outside of World and Iceborne. So it goes up here in high A tier. Really neat monster. Next up, we have another third generation bear type monster. I believe this was also portable third when it debuted. This is Lagombi. Lagombi is a big koala bunny bear that lives in the ice type regions. And it fights you by slapping you around with its claws. It can use its armored belly to slide around Tokyo Drift style and go initial D on you. And it can pick up chunks of ice and wing them at you too. Meant as an early game target to introduce you into the ice locale. Lagombi is pretty neat looking, and its fight's not bad. So I'm going to put you up here on C tier below Arzuros. I think Lagombi's a little less iconic than the regular bear, but it's a good fight. It's got enough of a unique series of moves that I think is noteworthy. I wouldn't drop it down too much further than that. All right. Next up, we have the flagship for Monster Hunter Rise, aka the creature on the box, the mascot of that game. We have Magnamalo. Magnamalo is a fanged wyvern, same type as Zinogre. And it is a big armored tiger wyvern-ish. It is a very speedy creature, and it has this unique type of element to it called Hellfire. And Hellfire is an ailment that, kind of like Blast, when you get hit with it, after a certain amount of time, it'll explode. Or if you get hit by an attack, it'll detonate it, like Blast. And I fought this thing a few times. This is the big purple speedy boy. Magnamalo is deceptively quick in that not only are its moves and strikes very fast, and it uses its tail kind of like a spear or naginata, it uses this Hellfire element like a gas. It spreads around like a gas and explodes. It uses that to propel itself. Like, not literally like a fart, but people jokingly refer to it as like fart propulsion. But Magnamalo will use that Hellfire gas to shoot itself across the screen and into the air like a bullet. And it is insanely quick and very, very dangerous. But it's a really neat fight. Definitely worthy of being up here on A tier. I'm going to put Magnamalo below a Cantor. Very, very cool flagship. And dangerous too. This one was troublesome on base rise. It's one of the story, quote unquote, story mode targets. And it's tough. It's a tough fight. It is tough on master rank in Sunbreak. I have not fought the variant Scorned Magnamalo. This is a master rank 100 target, I believe. So I'm not even close to being able to unlock this one. But I hear this fight's even more ridiculous. Yeah, really cool monster. I like Magnamalo. It's got a lot of personality. Next up, we have another creature that debuted in 4th generation. This was Monster Hunter Generations. This is Mizutsune. Mizutsune is one of the Fated Four, alongside Astalos, who is also in Sunbreak. I think I've ranked Astalos already. Where are you? Just up here on S tier. In Generations, you had 4 flagships, since it was a kind of anniversary game. Mizutsune, Astalos, Glavenus, down here, and Gammoth, the big woolly mammoth type creature, which we've ranked already. Gammoth's up here. And Mizutsune is a Leviathan. Like I mentioned briefly on the Apex version, Mizutsune is a scaled and furry Leviathan, kind of like a fox. And it's got these fins, these kind of elegant looking, brightly colored fins. And its element is water. It uses a secretion from its body to create this bubbly foam wherever it moves. And it creates them as a projectile and uses it to sort of glide around really quickly. And the bubbles are an ailment themselves. So if you get hit by its bubble attacks, you'll get what's called Bubble Blight. And when you get hit by one, it actually ups your evasion and gives you a little bit of a buff. If you get hit by Bubble Blight more than once, it turns into a status that causes you to slip and slide all over the place, and you're unable to really do anything until you either cure it or get hit. And in addition to that, Mizutsune is very fast. One of the quickest of the Fated Four. When it's not gliding all over the place or shooting beams of water, it's pelting with bubbles. Very neat, very dynamic, and memorable fight. So I think, aside from Gammoth, which rates a little lower, I think all of the Fated Four are going to be on S tier for me. I really like Mizutsune. Seeing this one come back in Rise was really great for the community, since no one thought it was ever going to get out of those Generations games. Really cool monster. Moving right along, we have a monster from the older generation. This is from second gen, technically, I believe. Oh, where's my cord? Headphones are caught on my chair. There we go. This is Nargacuga. Nargacuga is the flagship of Monster Hunter Freedom Unite, the first game in the series I ever played. And so right away, this monster's got a little bit of a special place in my heart because it's from the game that got me into the series. But Narga is a flying type wyvern. It is a sort of jet black or really dark blue panther owl like wyvern. It's got a really slender body and it's kind of armored beak. That's why I say bird or owl like. And it has a long, flexible tail that bristles with these kind of quills when it gets mad, and it can launch them at you or just smack you with its tail. And its arms, as a wyvern, it's got wing arms, but they have these blades, which you can sort of see in the image here, on the little wing fingers. They're actually really sharp blades that it uses to cut at its enemies. Very cool monster that's always focused on a fast-paced agility type fight. And every game it's shown up in, it's got a pretty similar moveset, but one that forces you to be on your toes and dodge. Nargacuga is my favorite monster in the entire series. I've mentioned that off and on. I've probably mentioned it on the playthrough of Rise a couple times, but this monster is my favorite. It's at the very top of the list. I like its design. I think its fight's really fun. It's from the game that got me in the series. It's a joy to fight whenever it shows up in a game. So yeah, I'm not the only one who really likes this monster, but as far as favorites, there's a lot of really strong contenders. But yeah, Narga, top tier. Really cool monster. Really fun fight. Can't wait to fight its rare species down here in probably a couple weeks when that comes out. That's going to be painful. Moving on, we have another monster that debuted in 5th generation in World. This is Pukei-Pukei. Pukei-Pukei is a bird-type wyvern, technically, even though it doesn't really have a lot of bird-like features. It actually is kind of similar in design to Chameleos. It's got this chameleon-like face and a long tongue. Pukei-Pukei is an early game target from World. You fight it in I believe the desert or the forest area, and it can do things like eat objects from the environment and store seeds in its mouth and use them to kind of spray poison everywhere. And it's kind of your introduction to ailments. And it's got a decent amount of personality. I like Pukei-Pukei. We're going to put you over here below Kulu-Ya-Ku. And not a terribly challenging target, but I like its color and design, and its fight is fine. Perfectly serviceable early game target. Oh, this is where you show up. Next up, we have a very, very notorious monster from all the way back, I think, 2nd generation. Maybe 1st or 2nd generation, I don't know exactly without looking it up. But this is Rajang. And Rajang is a fanged beast. They were formerly called the Pelagus types, I believe. It is a gorilla bull Dragon Ball Z monster. And the reason why I say that is because there are a lot of nods to DBZ and Rajang's design. You fight it, and it's this quadrupedal, and it occasionally stands up. Big ape-like creature with these big bull-like horns and a long tail. And it fights you by trying to punch you. It can spit a giant Kamehameha beam of electric energy. It can sort of Blanca ball out of the sky and try and land on you. And it's very aggressive. Rajang is super, super aggressive in every game it's been in. And it'll be in your face trying to beat you or electrocute you. And when you make it mad, its normally black fur turns gold, a la Dragon Ball Z. And then it gets even more mad. And after you beat on it for a while, knock it over, it'll go into what's called Rampage mode, where it charges up energy in its arms, and its fists become very, very hard, and you can't really damage it with cutting weapons. And it continues to punch you until you knock it out of that mode. There is a variant species for Rajang down here. We'll talk about you later. But this creature is very, very fun. Difficult, especially if you're using a slower weapon. But the Knots DBZ, the kind of aggressive, fast-paced nature of the fight, Rajang is cool. So we're gonna put you up on A tier. I'll put you below Abyssalagi. If you want to fight the Angry Monkey, I've done this a couple times on stream. It's a fun fight. It was very difficult in Iceborne, which is the most recent entry to bring it back, or the second most recent after Rise. And that fight was a nightmare with the gun lance because it was so quick. Cool monster. Next up, we have another entry in a family of monsters that only has a couple members so far. This is Rachna Kadaki. Rachna Kadaki is a member of the Temnoceran family, which are the spiders, like Nerscylla up here on A tier, and pretty much Nerscylla and its subspecies are the only members of the Temnocerans outside of the ones added in Rise and Sunbreak. And Rachna Kadaki is this big, sort of web-covered spider creature. It's got a big sort of abdomen that houses a bunch of babies that it can use to sort of spread around and zip line using its webs by connecting to the babies and kind of whipping itself around. It's a fire element creature, so it'll light you on fire either by expelling fire from its body or breathing it like a flamethrower. And design-wise, Rachna is based on a pelican spider, which I didn't even know existed until people mentioned it after they revealed this creature. If you've never heard of a pelican spider, do yourself a favor and Google it real quick. It is one of the most bizarre-looking creatures that exists on this planet. I've never seen a bug that looks like that. And that's part of the inspiration for Rachna Kadaki's design. But it's got this long neck, which is normally folded back, behind its big sort of bludgeoning arms, and then it could take that arm, that head rather, and extend it out like on a long sort of folding neck, which is I think what comes from the pelican spider. But a very, very interesting design. The fight itself is, I'd say, above average. Rachna Kadaki has all this webbing covering its limbs, and you have to break it off in order to do damage. And as a result, it can soak a lot of punishment. But I think it's fine. I'm going to put the base version up here on B tier. I'm going to put Rachna in the middle. I'll put you above Diablos. Iconic says, very strange. Yeah, pelican spiders are wild. They're very small, too. I don't think they get very big, but they're so unusual. Like, I'll show it off on stream for people. Yeah. So pelican spiders there's a bunch of different species, but the one that I've seen before has like a long sort of neck and the head's up here. And then it's got these like mandible. I think these are the mandibles it uses to grab things. And then it's got the legs down here. Very unusual shape for a creature, but really cool looking. If I saw a big version of this thing, it would probably freak me out. But as far as I can tell, they're not super big. But interesting design, and the basis for a creature in a Monster Hunter game I think is really cool. So you might not be a fan of spiders, and that's fine, but I think Rachna Kadaki is pretty neat. We will talk about its subspecies further down. Next up, we have a monster from way back in the first generation that is only showing up this late because it's in Rise, and that's where it's been lumped in the category. But this is Rathian. Rathian, the female counterpart to Rathalos. Where's Rathalos? Oh, here? Okay, I guess we're talking about Rathalos in World. But Rathian is the female counterpart, and she's known as Queen of the Earth, I believe. While Rathalos spends a lot of time in the air, Rathian spends a lot more time on the ground. And a lot of her moveset involves sort of charging, flipping around with her tail in the air, and breathing fire on the ground. This monster has been in almost, I think, pretty much every single game. It's one of the mainstays. And her moveset is fine. They give her a little bit of tweaks here or there, but more or less the fight is unchanged in a lot of ways. Kind of a mid-early game target. Rathian is fine. I would say her consistency in the series is going to keep her from being ranked too low. But we'll put you down here. The only reason why I rate Rathian so low is that her fight is not the most dynamic. But, again, very iconic monster. It's been in the series for a long time. So, we'll keep her out of the just bang average tier. Next up, we have another newcomer to Rise. This is a Leviathan type. This is Somnicanth. Somnicanth is a kind of mermaid-esque type creature. I wonder if that was a direct inspiration or if there's a Japanese yokai. I think there's a Japanese yokai for this one. Let's see. Unique physiology, yada, 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 yada. I see. Sort of Western and Japanese folklore of mermaids as well as sea otters. Okay, that makes sense. Somnicanth you fight in a mix of cold or water-based areas. It spends its time sort of swimming around, and it doesn't have an innate element, but it bears the sleep element. When you fight Somnicanth, a lot of its attacks will put you to sleep, which makes it pretty dangerous. In addition to being able to sleep you when it's in the water, sometimes it'll swim around on its back like an otter, and it'll crack objects off of its armored chest, and some of those objects will explode, some will flashbang and stun, and as a result, it's kind of dangerous. I think Somnicanth is alright. I'm gonna put you up on C tier. I think its design is pretty unique. It has these big billowy fins on its head that look kind of like hair. Not bad. We'll get to subspecies over here a little bit later. Next up, we have another Elder Dragon. This is one that goes pretty far back, I think, to 2nd generation. This is Teostra. Teostra, the Fire Dragon. As an Elder, you fight Teostra in the sort of late game. It's part of the 3, along with Kushala Daora and Chameleos. And it's essentially a big, fiery lion dragon. And Teostra is pretty neat. It's got a really striking design, like a red and dark purple kind of color scheme with a crown of gold hair on its head, like an actual crown. And it fights you by creating blast clouds and breathing fire. Having fought Teostra across many games, I do like this monster a lot. It's gone through some iterations, but never really had kind of the peaks and valleys of Kushala. So I'll put Teostra up here on A tier. I'll put you down here. I think I like its design more than its fight, but it's fine. You just have to be careful. You're going to find yourself either getting blown up or lit on fire. Yeah, neat monster. Next up, we've got Tetranodon, another newcomer from Rise. Tetranodon is an amphibian type of creature, which you don't see a lot of, but it is a big, sort of rotund, armored creature inspired by the Kappa. And as a result, it has a bunch of moves that also are inspired by sumo. So when you fight this big sort of turtle platypus creature, it is a bigger target and a little bit heavier, so it doesn't move super quickly, but it'll try and swat you with its arms or stomp on you. But when you make it mad, it'll eat a bunch of rocks and balloon itself up to a much larger size, and that's when the fight really starts, because Tetranodon will adopt a bunch of like sumo slam type moves. It'll try and bowl you over with a bunch of really dangerous charges, and It's a pretty interesting fight. And it's a neat concept and kind of similar to Zamtrios, the ice shark. And it's a water element creature. I do like Tetranodon. So you're going to go up here on B tier. Let's put you above the crabs. Neat monster. Again, I like the tie-ins with Japanese yokai in Rise, but also pulling in things like, sumo wrestler moves is pretty fun. Tetsukabra from 3rd generation also does that too. A lot of stomps and pushes, shoves. All right, next up we have one of the later game targets, Elder Dragons. It's tied in the story of Rise. This is Thunder Serpent Narwa. And Thunder Serpent Narwa is an Elder Dragon. She is the female counterpart to Wind Serpent Ibushi, so we should just do these back to back. Let's do it like this. Iconic says, Yokai and Sumo are cool, things to draw from. Yeah, it is neat how the Monster Hunter developed team, in their designs for creatures, they will do things like pull in inspiration from, one, real-world creatures. They go out to zoos and natural locations and just observe animals and then jot down ideas to put together when they create the creatures. For Rise, they went specifically to yokai and said, okay, what types of historical Japanese mythology creatures do we want to draw from? And then they sort of put all that together when they design the cast. It's a really neat process. I don't know if Narwa is based on a yokai specifically, though. There is a lightning element or thunder element. I don't know if it's supposed to be based on a Raiju. Let's see. I've actually never looked that up. I'm not seeing... Let's see. What do they say in the trivia? As one of the endgame bosses, it's very possible there's a bunch of different inspirations, but nothing specific. Thunder Serpent Narwa is based off the Japanese thunder god Raijin. Okay. Literally, the god of thunder. Makes sense. So that means Ibushi, the wind serpent's based off Fujin, god of wind. But Narwa, as the female counterpart, is this big floating thunder serpent. And both her and her counterpart have this interesting thing in their design where they float upside down. I think I've fought this thing a few times on stream. But in addition to that, being kind of suspended in the air, her attacks are all lightning and thunder based, so she'll be filling the area with projectiles and bolts of lightning. And both the serpents have this very unusual design on their faces, where they have these kind of double jaws. Kind of like I forget which eel it is, but they have this outer part and these inner double jaws. It's very unusual. It's almost an alien type look, which is kind of unique for Monster Hunter. But Narwa is okay. This is a very barely above average fight. I think her design is alright. But this one doesn't rate as high because I honestly find the fight a little bit annoying, especially if I'm not using range. So I'm going to put Narwa at the bottom of B tier. Design carries much further than fight, but it's pretty okay. This is essentially your base Rise story boss. And there is I think this is considered a variant or just a different version of Narwa. The final quote-unquote story boss of Rise is All Mother Narwa, in which she's absorbed the power of her mate, Ibushi, and you get a superpowered version, like the actual real version of this creature, which is even harder. I believe... actually, I don't think Pink and I did this one yet, but it is a difficult fight. All Mother is the original fight on crack. I'm going to rate it one tier lower just because of the sheer difficulty, because the design is very much the same. She has some different glowy bits and very subtle changes to her design, but it's more or less like, here's a super version. And so it's fine. The Serpents, I think, fell victim to Rise's development being impacted by COVID. They're interesting ideas, but they're not implemented the best compared to some other things. Like I'll briefly touch on the end of Sunbreak without getting into spoilers for the boss, but the end of Sunbreak and its boss fight are implemented much better. The final, quote-unquote, final boss of Sunbreak is awesome. And it was pretty serviceable in Rise. Almost mid. So the other counterpart, Wind Serpent Ibushi down here, is the male counterpart to Narwa. Like the name would suggest, it is a similar design and this kind of weird alien-like serpent dragon creature, and Ibushi uses wind and dragon element instead of lightning and thunder. And his fight's fine. I actually think his fight's less annoying than Narwa's. But you fight this creature in Rampage, and then later on it gets its own quest. And in Sunbreak you fight it outside of Rampages because they don't exist. But you combat and you fight Ibushi by using its wind gust, kind of get in the air, and then you jump up on platforms to hit it. It's fine. I'm going to put Ibushi tied with Narwa at the bottom of B tier. Again, these are both serviceable fights. The master rank versions are a little more difficult in that they can kill you in a couple hits, but I personally wouldn't want to grind their fights too much. It's pretty okay to me. Moving on, we have another monster that debuted in 5th generation in World, and Iceborne World specifically. This is Tobi Kadachi. And Tobi Kadachi is a fanged wyvern. Fanged wyvern, not fanged beast, I'm pretty sure. Same as Zinogre. Tobi Kadachi. Yeah, fanged wyvern. Fanged beasts tend to be a bit more mammal-like, usually. But you fight Tobi, and Tobi's got this quadrupedal, fuzzy, kind of snapsid-looking creature, and it has some elements taken from like a flying squirrel. It's got this membrane on its arms, can use to glide, and it uses thunder element, so it's an electric-type creature. And as you fight it, it'll charge up static and eventually go into like a supercharged state. In World, Tobi was an early game target. You fight it in the forest, and it's not too difficult. It teaches you a bit about elemental blights and how to deal with speedier targets. In Rise, they made Tobi a mid-game target, and it's a lot more dangerous. Much in the way they sort of overhauled Juratotis, they made Tobi a lot faster and made it hit a lot harder. So everyone going in thinking this was just going to be a pushover like in World was pretty rudely awakened when all of a sudden Zippy the lizard lightning squirrel had moves that could kill you pretty quickly. And I do like Tobi's design a lot. Fight is pretty dynamic and forces you to stay on your toes. So I'll put Tobi up here on B tier under Barioth. We'll get to subspecies down in the Iceborne section over here. All right, we are making progress. We'll be able to get through, I think, this whole tier today, but I don't think we're going to have time for anything else. But that's okay. Next up, we have a 3rd generation monster. This one was also from Portable Third, I believe. This is Volvidon, the armadillo. This one is a fanged beast. It's of the same type as the bears. So Arzuros, Lagombi, Gosharag, Volvidon, they're from the same family. And design-wise, Volvidon has a bunch of armadillo and kind of pangolin attributes. It's a heavily armored creature that can roll into a ball and bounce around, like an armadillo. And it has a long, stretchy tongue it can whip around and smack you. It can spit paralysis toxin at you, and it can also fart. In fact, the most dangerous thing this thing does is fart in a big cloud around it, which inflicts soiled status, which means you can't heal until you cure the status or it goes away. I like Volvidon. It's a monster with a lot of personality, and it's a pretty manageable fight, not too hard. So I'm going to put you in B tier. I'll put you in right here. A monster with a lot of personality without being obnoxious. Alright. Now we're moving into Sunbreak territory. These are all monsters that were introduced in the recent expansion for Rise that came out several weeks ago. Sunbreak. So we have a bunch of subspecies and then some new entries further down, kind of mixed. First up, we have Aurora Somnacanth. This is a subspecies for regular Somnacanth, which we put up here. The mermaid. Aurora Somnacanth is a pure ice species. You fight it in the icy tundra, Frozen Islands area. And it looks pretty similar model-wise. It's got some slightly different coloring and other things on it. But instead of using sleep element, its moveset all revolves around ice. And it is very dangerous. I'd say much more dangerous than regular Somnacanth, just because a lot of its attacks tend to affect an area, kind of more of a area effect threat. But I like Aurora Somnacanth. I think it's a much more interesting subspecies than the regular version. So I'm going to put you up here on B tier. Put you under Volvidon. This is a case of the subspecies, I think, being more noteworthy than the regular one. Next up, we have a subspecies for Bishaten, a feathered Tengu monkey. This is Blood Orange Bishaten. And I see Iconic has redeemed a Hydrate. Very well, I will drink more of my Gafuel. So Blood Orange Bishaten, introduced in Sunbreak, is a blast subspecies of the regular Bishaten. It is definitely more aggressive, but instead of tossing out persimmons from its mysterious pouch, it uses pine cones. And these are pine cones that explode. I can't remember if I fought this one on stream, maybe not. But you fight it towards the earlier part of Master Rank, and it's a pretty dangerous monster. It's very quick, and it tosses these exploding pine cones that create hazards everywhere. They kind of spin about and light things up. Iconic says, Gafuel for the soul. That's right. I do like this metal reinforced cup I have, since it keeps everything very cold since it's hot. But I have a bunch of, I think I mentioned this before, I have a bunch of tubs of the G Fuel caffeine free because I can't drink caffeine. And then I have a bunch of the Gamer Sups caffeine free as well. And so what I usually do is I'll just mix the flavors together on stream when I'm drinking these. They're pretty good. Not sponsored, by the way. So where are we going to put Exploding Pinecone Bishaten? We're going to put you... Where is the other one? It's almost a tie. Regular Bishaten's over here. I'll put you tied. It's a different flavor for the fight. You know, exploding pine cones versus dangerous persimmon barrages, while still being decently challenging. I think it's noteworthy. So we'll put Blood Orange over here. Next up, we have a newcomer to the mainline series, but not newcomer to Monster Hunter overall. This is the one I mentioned earlier, Espinas, who comes from Frontier. The first major flagship of Frontier, in fact, is Flying-type Wyvern Espinas, and it was brought back for Sunbreak and introduced to the console mainline version of the games for the first time, which is super noteworthy because they've never done that. They haven't done that in many, many, many games. So the idea that we could be seeing more Frontier creatures come over is very exciting. And so Espinas is a new monster hunter target for a lot of people, myself included. It is a flying-type wyvern, and similar in body shape and style to Rathian and Rathalos, but it's covered in spiky armor. When you encounter it on the map, it's always sleeping, and it's just sitting there in its nest, and you have to smack it a bunch of times just to wake it up. And then once you wake it up, it will just kind of wander around and ignore you. In that state, most things will bounce off and you'll do virtually no damage. After you smack Espinas for a while, then it will wake up in quotes, and realize you're a threat and get super angry. And once it does that, then the fight actually starts. And it goes from this sort of docile, lumbering creature to something that is basically a big spiky train. It'll try and run you over. It will breathe fireballs, very fast fireballs that are capable of inflicting fire blight, poison, and paralysis all at once, which is unique. It's a unique mechanic for this creature, and it's incredibly dangerous. When I fought this thing, I knew it was going to be a challenge, but it was strong enough to kill me in one hit for some of its attacks. Very, very cool. I could see why people were excited having played Frontier. So Espinasa's inclusion is very significant, and this monster is going to go right up near the top of the list. I'm going to put you up here on A tier. I'm going to put you above Dolamadur. I'm going to leave it there. I think I like Espinasa's design more than these other ones here, even though their fights might not necessarily be comparable. Iconic says Edge Boy. Yeah, the whole mechanic of, I'm not even going to bother until you tick me off is interesting. But that is a holdover from the original games. Espinasa was just this big, oblivious creature until you make it mad. And then once you make it mad, then it's out for blood. So very cool monster. Not part of the rating here, but its gear is also really cool. Fire and or poison. All right. Moving right along, we have another new creature from Sunbreak, one of the three lords. This is Garangolm. Garangolm is a fanged beast, I believe. Let me double check. Yeah, Fang Beast. A little bit hard to see from its icon art here, but Garangolm is a big, this thing is a big unit of a monster. It's gorilla-like in its body type, similar to Rajang, but it is much larger and more heavily armored, and has this big sort of long tail. I did fight this thing, I think I fought this thing on stream at least once, maybe not. You fight it towards the beginning of Master Rank, and it's the first of the Lords, but Garangolm is a heavy-hitting, somewhat slower target, but it's got a really cool moveset. As the fight goes, it'll take its arms and punch into the ground and pull out on one kind of like a molten rocky covering, and on the other one it'll pull out like a water mossy covering. So when it does that, it gains the ability to inflict fire and water with its attacks. And in addition to doing that, as the fight proceeds, every once in a while, Garangolm will take its firearm and just punch the ground and rocket jump, propel itself across the map and land on you. Very kind of surprising the first time you see it. This big, heavily armored monkey, and then all of a sudden it's just boosting in the air with explosions. Very cool fight. I like Garangolm a lot. It's not super common that a new entry will rocket up the tier list immediately, but it's an incredibly interesting fight. So I'm going to put Garangolm up here below Nursula. I like the design, and the fight itself is again, very interesting. They did a good job with the three lords, which we'll see in order here. The second of the three lords, this is Lunagaron. And the three lords are inspired by Western monsters and creatures of mythology, Garangolm being inspired by a Frankenstein monster or golem. Lunagaron, which is a fanged wyvern. Lunagaron is inspired by a werewolf. It is a kind of canine, wolf-like creature, but instead of being heavily furred, it's covered in plates and scales. And you fight it in essentially its first phase, and it's kind of quadrupedal. It'll move all over the place. This is probably the most agile of the three lords, and it'll kind of swat you, use ice element breath to kind of freeze you. And then when you make it mad, it will switch modes and go bipedal and cover itself in ice. its body and claws will get covered in ice armor, kind of like Zamtrios, the shark. And then when it does that, it changes its moveset to be a lot more almost like martial arts looking. I really would like to know if the devs were influenced by John Talbane from Darkstalkers and they designed this creature, because when it goes into its first and second rage modes, it's fighting bipedally, but it has all these flipping moves where it'll like leap across and try and spear you with its claws, do these like flipping slashes, and it becomes very, very dangerous. The first time I fought that thing and it went into rage mode, it killed me with one of its flipping like double slash moves. And so the fight pace changes dramatically when you make Lunagaron mad. It's very interesting. So for that, we're going to put you up on A tier as well. I think all three of the lords going to be no lower than A tier. I think Lunagaron is more interesting of a fight than Garangolm, but it's pretty close. Both of these monsters are very interesting. Very different. This one focuses on power. This one focuses very heavily on speed. Next up, we've got a subspecies for Almudron. This is also a first debut in Sunbreak. This is Magma Almudron. Whereas the original Mudweasel spends a lot of its time submerged and covering its body in mud, or surrounding itself in mud rather, and using its projectiles, you fight Magma Almudron in the volcano, and its body is covered in kind of like a layer of magma, and all of its attacks revolve around flinging molten things at you. It is very dangerous, and the fight has a different pace than the regular one in that Magmaldron, or Magmadron, some people call it, is faster, much faster. And I think the pace of the fight's a little bit better. So where to put the original one? Low B or C? Where to put you? Down here? I think the fight is more interesting. It's harder. I think Magma Almudron is more difficult. But I'm going to put you further up here on B tier. Let me put you over here. It's an interesting way to flip the formula around on the fight, while not really reinventing the wheel. We're going to see that with the next one, in fact. But definitely cool iteration on the monster. Again, everything in Sunbreak is well designed. All of the creatures are very different and feel very well fleshed out. And keeping in line with that sentiment, we have Pyrrhochnakadaki. This is a subspecies for the spider that we saw, the pelican spider. And well, the first one, the original version, is fire-based. Pyrrhochnakadaki, still being volcanic in nature, is blast. So its moves are more of a, combustion explosion based than just straight fire. And this one surprised me. First time I fought Pyrrhochnakadaki, kind of like all the other subspecies, this one surprised me a little bit. And you fight her in usually a volcanic environment. She will use her babies as exploding projectiles instead of mobility. So where the first one would kind of use them as zip lines to move around, Pyrrhochnakadaki will toss out the babies and then use their webs as like a channel for throwing out explosions. And so it covers this huge spread area, and it's very dangerous. It's a lot more of an hazard area than the original. In addition to that, well, whereas regular Rochnakadaki is a little bit slower, Pyrrhochnakadaki is fast. It seems like a big theme for a lot of these subspecies is higher speed. And she has one move, which next time I fight this thing, I'll try and point it out on stream. But she has this move where if you're behind her, she'll unfold her head and then bend it over backwards to look at you and then scuttle at you at high speed. And the first time I saw it, it almost made me drop my controller because I was not expecting it. But in addition to being quick in general, when it does that and you just see the spider sort of look over its shoulder, as it were, and then charge at you very quickly, it is something that no one expects the first time. and the fight is just very differently paced and much quicker. And so I'm rating Pyrarachnokodaki higher than the original. I think this is a really cool subspecies. So I'm going to put you on... Where's the original? Mid B. I'm going to put you right under Zamtrios. Very, very interesting twist on the fight. And decently challenging. And the whole design, instead of the kind of white cloaked webs of regular Arachnokodaki, Pyre has this kind of black webbing. It is kind of a more burnt color scheme. And it looks very similar. Some minor model differences, but the coloring is different. Neat monster. Wasn't quite sure what the subspecies fight was going to play out like, but definitely cool. All right, couple more entries in Sunbreak. Now we have the flagship for Sunbreak. We have Malzeno. And Malzeno is the poster creature, one that you see on the box. And this is the third of the three lords. Malzeno is a standard, quote-unquote, standard type of elder dragon. A winged elder dragon. And its whole inspiration for theme is a vampire. Its mechanics and basic theme are all inspired by vampires and or Draculas. And when you fight Malzeno, it has a lot of attacks that use its tail kind of like a spear, and it's very quick. It moves around a lot. I think I fought this thing on stream a few times. It can do this sort of lateral Psycho Crusher type move, and it's very fast in general. It inflicts a unique ailment called Blood Blight when it hits you. And when you get inflicted with Blood Blight, your health ticks down over time. And you have to do counter damage in order to get that health back. So much like the rally system in Bloodborne, you're kind of fighting with this thing to maintain life. And it's very kind of push and pull while you're trying to avoid getting hit in the first place, because Malzeno is incredibly dangerous. When you make it mad, it goes into a rage state, and then it's kind of, I think it's technically a second rage state where it starts glowing, and its body kind of turns dark, shadowy, and black. When it does that, it gets the ability to teleport. And I didn't do this fight in the demo because I wanted to go in cold and not be spoiled. First time I fought Malzeno for real, and it got mad, and all of a sudden it starts instant transmissioning all over the map. That surprised me as well. And it can't cover super long distances, but if you try and get away from it, it'll fold its arms in front of its body or its wings, and then poof, it'll bamf over to a different part of the map, and it can get in your face very quickly. And so I think Malzeno is a really cool fight. As a flagship, it's very well designed and memorable, and it is not easy to take down. So I'm going to put you under Fatalis, Crimson Fatalis. Very neat monster. And you can cue the Morbius memes, as everyone was doing when it came out. But yeah, neat flagship. All right. Last entry for Rise, technically. We have some other ones down here that are included because they show up in Rise, or Sunbreak rather. We'll get to them at the end. Well, I don't really feel like moving them around. It's fine. But we have this one right here, which I'm not going to name because this is the final boss of Sunbreak. I think it's not too much of a spoiler just to show its icon, but I'm not going to talk about its name, and I'm not really going to talk about its fight. All I will say is final boss of Sunbreak is awesome. I think this one, I need to fight this one a little bit more. I fought it maybe about half a dozen times or so as I was farming stuff up, maybe more. I don't know if this one breaks into S tier. It's really good, and it's going to go up here right above Lucent, but compared to the sort of average end of base Rise with the Serpents, final boss of Sunbreak is much more epic in scale. I really like this fight, and it shifts between different phases. Maybe After the game's been out for a while, maybe I can show that off, because I really don't want to spoil people, because I have friends that are going to be playing Sunbreak eventually, and I'm sure they wouldn't appreciate being spoiled on Final Boss. But just know that this creature's cool. Very, very large scale, fun fight. Alright. Now we're officially looking at entries that were either present in World and Iceborne or debuted in World and Iceborne. So there'll be some exceptions. In fact, this first one, Azur-Rathalos, is a very old monster. I think it's second generation subspecies. I think for subspecies that I don't find are noteworthy, I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them. Azur-Rathalos is the same element as the regular one down here. It's just tougher and tends to spend more time in the air. I like its color scheme. I think its fight is pretty meh. So Azur is going to go down here. Likewise, I'm going to skip a little bit just to save some time here. Pink Rathian is the equivalent for Rathian in subspecies. She's been in a lot of the older games, but same deal. You have a slightly different moveset and higher damage and speed. Other than that, it's not super distinctive a fight. If it weren't for their color schemes being good and me liking their design, they'd probably be down here in the garbage subspecies tier and D tier or F tier. I don't dislike them that much. Let's see. I think that'll be fine for skipping ahead. Let's see. Should talk about Jörmungandr and Scarred Jörmungandr. We'll get there when we get there. It's fine. So we'll start at the top. A monster that debuted in World and was one of the initial press fights that they showed off when the game was announced is Anjanath. Anjanath is a brute type wyvern, and it's essentially a big, furry pink T-Rex that spits fire. And it's an early game target, but not a pushover. In fact, Anjanath was a really big wall for a lot of people who started in World, because it's a tough fight. You fight this thing in the forest initially, and basically it's a super aggressive, big target that will try and knock you over, bite you. It can breathe fire like a flamethrower. Pretty dangerous. But as an early game kind of learn the game target, I like Anjanath, so we're going to put you up on B tier. Put you above the crabs. I think Anjanath was more difficult in World. It's been toned down a little when it was in base Rise. Still a good addition, but I felt like it was more of a threat in World. But cool monster, good addition to the cast. Next up, we have another newcomer that debuted in World, and is its variant on here. I would be shocked if it wasn't. Oh, here it is. Okay, we'll do these in tandem. This is Bazelgeuse. Bazelgeuse is a flying type wyvern, and in World and Iceborne, World specifically when it was introduced, this thing was a terror. The B-52 bomber. In World, Basil would function like an invader type. So in a lot of quests, it'd be on the map flying around and it wouldn't be your target. Let's see. Is that a new hydrate redeemed from Iconic? All right, I'll grab some fuel. And so you get to a map, and this is big flying target just kind of roaming around. Inevitably, it will realize you're on the map and crash your party. And when Basil shows up, its theme overpowers whatever it is you're fighting. And all of a sudden, everything starts exploding. This is the one that looks like a big, sort of bulky, pine cone-esque, kind of like Seregios down here. But Basil drops these exploding scales everywhere, and it is incredibly dangerous. As a result, it was a threat, but it is a really cool monster. Returning in base Rise, one of the endgame targets, it was fun hunting Basil again. They didn't really change its moveset too much, but its tendency to invade was definitely removed. It didn't do that as much. So I'm going to put Basil over here. Very neat monster. One of my favorite additions to the cast from 5th generation. Very unique and very dangerous. And its theme is awesome. I was talking to Matt about this the other day. Basil's theme is very much kind of like a Ride of the Valkyries inspired, like soaring theme. You hear it and you immediately know you're going to get blown up. Very cool. Its variant, Seething Basilgeuse, is actually going to be coming to Sunbreak in the update this month. So a lot of people are going to get to experience that fight if they started with Rise. This is a more angry version of the regular Basilgeuse, and it starts in kind of an already agitated state. And the reason why Seething is noteworthy, one, compared to the original, again, the only point of comparison I have is from Iceborne, because I haven't fought this thing in Sunbreak yet. It's not out. But compared to the original one, Seething would stay on the ground more. It was a bit more of a manageable fight, but more dangerous. And the reason why it was more dangerous is because its exploding scales would still detonate, but now had the ability to go nuclear. Instead of just dropping and exploding, they would sort of charge up into this bright purple state, and their explosion radius would be much larger. In addition to that, the monster had this sort of nuke type attack it would do that would just blow everything in the area up. Very dangerous, but I thought the fight was a little bit more manageable than the regular one. So Seething is going to actually go higher up on the list. Seething Basil is going to go up here above Rajang. Very, very cool monster. I'm interested to see how they change the behavior for this one in Sunbreak. It's going to be tough. Whatever it is, there's going to be more explosions, but it should be fun. Next up, we have a unique monster from World and Iceborne. It's technically just World. And this is a crossover monster with Final Fantasy XIV, which makes it unique. This is Behemoth. It was part of a collab with FF14, and so you actually fight well-known Final Fantasy boss Behemoth in Monster Hunter. And it was a really interestingly designed fight. Not my favorite, but it was designed like an MMO in that you go in with different party members who have to have their own roles, otherwise you get instantly murdered. And it was kind of neat to implement. So I see Iconic got to go now. Thanks for the chill stream. Much love. Hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, Iconic. Thanks for stopping by and hanging out. Always appreciate the vibes. I like to think I'm going to be able to do this in less than another hour, but we'll see. So I hope the rest of your evening is good, and I will definitely catch you in the next one. We'll be back on Thursday for another gaming stream. Matt and I are going to attempt to beat Zelda. So send us your energy. We are essentially at the end of the run. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I'll catch you later, dude. Have a good one. So Behemoth, again, unique concept. Definitely treated like an MMO fight in a Monster Hunter game. I'm going to put it down here on B tier. There was an extreme version of this, Extreme Behemoth, which was even harder that I never managed to beat. That took the whole MMO mechanics and dialed them up to 11, and it was one of the most difficult things they've ever had in the game. But neat idea. We'll see if they do something like that for Rise. All right, next up, we have a subspecies for Diablos. This is Black Diablos. And the significance behind the subspecies is it doesn't have a different element. Black Diablos is essentially a female Diablos in heat during mating season. and her body turns this kind of dark black color, and she becomes much more aggressive. And so the move set for Black Diablos is much more dangerous. You get a lot more high speed charging attacks, and is a lot more of a threat than the regular one. And the regular one's pretty dangerous. I would say the subspecies fight's an interesting twist, but not super different. What I like about Black Diablos is actually just the design. I like the really dark color scheme. It's different from the regular one, that kind of sandy beige color. So I'm going to put Black Diablos in mid C tier, above the Wraths. In the older games, it seemed like it was a bit more distinct, but it's fine. The fact that it's such a more frantic, dangerous fight, and it's not just kind of a carbon copy, is going to keep it from dropping down in the D or F tier. But I'd like to see them do something a little bit more dynamic with Black Diablos in the future. All right. Moving on, we have a monster that made its debut in 3rd generation, but was a major player in World and Iceborne. In fact, this was a DLC, first monster of World, I believe. This is Deviljho. Deviljho, aka the Big Angry Pickle. And Deviljho made its debut in Tri. I think it was online only in Tri. But this is a brute type wyvern. Looks like a big, kind of bulky looking T-Rex with a long tail that breathes red dragon energy and is always hungry. Deviljho is one of my favorite entries in the entire series. It's a dangerous target, and it's always fun when it shows up. I'm going to put Deviljho in S tier behind Nakarkos. We've got no word of whether or not they're going to put Deviljho in Rise or Sunbreak, but seeing this thing come back in World and Iceborne was great. So many people got to experience the Angry Pickle for the first time, and it was an experience. This thing is merciless, but fun. I hope we see Deviljho in future titles. Its variant, which I'm going to boost up to the top here to cover now while we're talking about it, Savage Deviljho is a, again, variant species of the regular Angry Pickle, and it starts in a semi-rage state. The whole lore behind Savage Deviljho is it's a Deviljho that's gone crazy from hunger. It's so hungry that it starts to just explode with rage. And so it starts in kind of a rage state, and when you make it mad, dragon energy cloaks its entire head and upper body like a mane, and it's got this sort of flowing energy and just these blood red eyes peeking out from inside this cloud on its head. It's very intimidating and very dangerous. Savage is cool. Its moveset to me is a little more annoying though, because it tends to pounce and pin more often. So because it's a bit more of a troublesome fight, even though it's still very good, I'm going to put you down here. Savage is good. I think its gear is cooler, but it's not part of the ranking here. But the fact that it's a little bit more of a dangerous and troublesome fight is going to keep it out of the S tier. But still very good. Very dangerous target. Alright, next up we have another monster that debuted in 5th generation in World. This is Dodogama. Dodogama is a fanged wyvern. It is a big, kind of chonky, quadrupedal lizard-like creature. And you encounter Dodogama in the Elder's Recess, kind of like the volcanic area. And it kind of just moves around, minding its own business. It likes to eat rocks. And when you actually fight it, it uses Blast Element. And it'll do things like chomp on rocks and then spit them at you. It's kind of a mid-game target. But the noteworthy thing about Dodogama is it kind of became like the unofficial mascot of the community when World was out. It's just got this kind of unassuming look, and you can't see it from the icon, but it's got these little round eyes, and it's kind of a charming creature. But fight-wise, it's fine. Design-wise, it's fine. People would put this one on S tier just because it's kind of a beloved mascot. I am going to not follow the trend. I'm going to put Dodogama up here on high B tier. Primarily design based since its fight's not super difficult, but it's a good entry. I'd say it deserves its spot of being beloved as a mascot. All right. We've got some lower level targets here in the order. This is Great Gyros. Great Gyros is a fanged wyvern, and this was kind of like the Monster Hunter World equivalent of the pack raptors that we've seen in older games like Great Jaggy, Great Baggy, Great Macau. But not being a raptor, instead being similar style of creature like Tobi-Kadachi. Great Gyros is a quadrupedal creature you fight in the Rotten Vale, and it's got this kind of cobra-like hood on its head, and it can spit paralysis or bite and paralyzes targets. Not super challenging, but you'd have to kind of deal with its minions. It roams in a pack, and it'll send its minions after you, and they'll paralyze you as well. This one is fine. I think I like its design more than its actual fight. Its fight's pretty okay. We'll put Great Gyros down here. This one's fairly average. Keeping the trend of fanged wyverns and kind of more lower level targets, this is Great Jagras. Great Jagras might be the first or second target you fight in World. This thing is a quadrupedal kind of iguana-like lizard, similar in body style to Gyros. And it's a punching bag type target, being one of the early ones that introduces you to the game. It has an interesting mechanic where it'll eat things. It's a very hungry creature. It'll eat something like an Aptonoth, and then it'll get like a big like balloon state, and it can kind of use that to body slam you. It's a little more dangerous, but Jagras is pretty average. So I'll put it in the middle of C tier. Again, I don't want to be too harsh on the early game targets that are meant to introduce people to Monster Hunter and not be too overwhelming of a difficulty in fight, but its design is fine. We'll put Jagras here in the middle. Next up, we have an Elder Dragon introduced in the DLC for World. This is Kulve Taroth. And Kulve Taroth is a quadrupedal, kind of lizard-like Elder Dragon. She has these giant ram-like horns with the gold plating. And when you fight her, it's in a unique arena, kind of like these caverns. I think they're called like the El Dorado Caverns. And Kulve Taroth has this big mantle of gold plating. Her whole deal is that she covers herself in like this gold mineral type plating. And you fight her in these caverns kind of like a siege, in that you're moving through the different parts of the level, trying to do as much damage and break bits on her as soon as possible. And then it moves into a different section, and then you actually fight her for real in like an arena. And then once you do enough damage, she sheds her mantle and then moves into a final area where you fight her kind of one-on-one without the big heavy thing weighing her down, and it's a much more fast-paced dynamic fight. I think design-wise, Kulve Taroth is really cool. Like a big sort of gold-plated ram dragon. Yeah, that's a neat and kind of unique aesthetic. The fight itself is difficult. It's not really something you can solo. I'm sure people have, but it's really meant to be a multi-person hunt. I'm going to put you down here on lower A tier. The design carries this one more than the fight to me. One thing that was unique to Kulve Taroth is her weapons were random drops. You get different kind of parameters and combinations of stats based on the weapons you get from doing the fight. The bad part is you could get really screwed over by RNG trying to get certain pieces of gear, weapons from Kulve Taroth. And that randomized RNG factor is not what I consider really productive, because you can get, again, boned pretty bad by just bad luck. So that aspect is going to keep this entry from being like an S tier fight. But aside from that, everything else was pretty decently designed. I like the look of the monster, and the hunt itself was fine. The idea of random drops, I do not think belongs in Monster Hunter. So hopefully they don't do that for Sunbreak. Well, we'll see. Next up, we have another entry from World and Iceborne, but an older monster at return. This is Lavasioth. This was a frontier monster that showed up in the older games. I first encountered it in Freedom Unite. But Lavasioth is a Piscine Wyvern and has similar body type to Jurtotus. Very similar. But you fight it in a volcanic environment and it covers itself in lava. And the thing that makes Lavasioth kind of obnoxious from World and Iceborne and any other game is that as it's outside of the lava, its armor hardens, kind of like Agnaktor. And you have to either wait for it to go back under the surface to soften its armor or break it off, something like a gun lance. This fight was kind of annoying. It's annoying in almost every game it's in. So I'm going to put Lavasioth in low C tier. I think its design is fine, but its fight is a bit more of a slog. So you're going one tier above Plesioth, your cousin. Not the worst, but definitely has its downsides. Okay, let's group a couple of these together. We are making our way through this tier. I think we'll be able to do it this session, but it's gonna be a push. So this next entry is another newcomer to the series that debuted in Gen 5 with Monster Hunter World. This is Legiana. And Legiana is a flying type wyvern, ice element. It has very avian features. It's kind of like a beaked head with these long antennae. And it attacks by creating like these freezing gusts of wind that can cause ice blight. And its wings are these kind of unusual petal-shaped extensions. Very interesting design. I like Legiana's design a lot, actually. The fight itself was fine. You'd have to deal with it being kind of in the air a lot and manage that if you weren't using a ranged weapon. But it was fine. This is a pretty solid upper B tier creature. I'm surprised they haven't brought this one back for Sunbreak or Rise. Legiana, I'm going to put you above Yama. Of the newcomers, this is one that stood out to me. I think it's pretty cool. Its variant, introduced in Iceborne. This is Shrieking Legiana. Shrieking Legiana is essentially the regular version with a bunch of stronger attacks and some twists. It's a more difficult fight, but not dramatically different. It's definitely more annoying. I'm going to put Shrieking on C tier. I do like the way it looks. It's kind of more frosted over and covered in ice. I'll put you right here. But I'd be lying if I said this wasn't more of a chore to fight. I'd rather fight the regular version. Next up, we have the female counterpart to Teostra that showed up in the older Monster Hunter games and came back in World and Iceborne. This is Lunastra. Lunastra is an elder fire dragon like Teostra, but she focuses on pure fire as opposed to the blast element. And introduced in, I want to say, World DLC? I think it was World DLC. Lunastra was a tough fight. They managed to take the formula and make it a lot more dangerous. Her whole deal was that she had a lot of attacks that would linger on the field and light things on fire. So you have this whole management of hazards in addition to some attacks that would just cause damage over time. I did not enjoy this fight. I think her design is pretty cool as a counter to Teostra, but the fight itself brings this one down a considerable amount in my opinion. So I'm putting Lunastra above Kirin right here. I know I get that they were going for higher difficulty, but the way it was implemented ended up being kind of more annoying than anything else. It's a shame. As a result, I didn't like fighting Lunastra. All right. Next up, we have the flagship for Monster Hunter World, aka Monster on the Box, Elder Dragon Nergigante, the story boss of the base game, and a key antagonistic force throughout. Nergigante is a very interesting monster. I think from 5th generation, this one stands out as one of the more unique creatures introduced, Elder Dragon or not. Similar body type to the other winged Elder Dragons. You have 4 limbs, 2 wings, but Nergigante's whole unique mechanic is that its body is covered in these sharp spikes. And these spikes start to grow over time as you fight it. It's got this remarkable regenerative ability where after you break different bits, they'll start to grow back. And if you don't break off the different spikes, they'll eventually grow and they start white. And after they've been out for a while, they turn black. And when its whole body is covered in black spines, it'll do this one dive bomb sort of nuke type move to break them all off at once. It does a massive truckload of damage. And so the whole point of the fight is trying to break its bits and keep it from getting into that powered up state. But it's difficult because Nerg is very aggressive and very high in damage. But I think the pace of the fight is really interesting. Nergigante is a pretty well designed, in my opinion, and unique Elder Dragon. So I'm going to put it up here on S tier. I liked Nerg a lot. I think for a flagship and kind of like the poster child for the game, it does a good job. And I know it was pretty popular amongst people who started with World 2, so maybe we'll see it come back. A DLC monster in Sunbreak would be pretty neat. But we'll see. Its variant, Ruin of Nergigante, is tied into the storyline of Iceborne. And it is essentially a different version of regular Nergigante, and it has these crystalline spines that grow in addition to the regular ones. And it's got a kind of more aggressive and damaging moveset. Ruiner is good. In fact, I'm going to tie them. I like them both for different reasons. There's some subtle differences in its design, but it's kind of more of an evolved form of the fight. So I'm gonna tie them. It's hard for me to choose which one I like more. I think the idea of these lighter crystal spikes might win out in the design factor, but they're both good. So we'll keep them on the same tier and sort of the same spot. Next up, we have another newcomer that debuted in 5th generation in Monster Hunter World. This is Odogaron. Odogaron is a fanged wyvern, quadrupedal, lizard-like, kind of synapsid creature, similar to Tobi-Kadachi. And this one is native to the Rotten Vale. And Odogaron is unusual in design in that its body is kind of this textured fleshy like material. It doesn't have fur or scales, but it's got this unusual sort of pattern texture look on its body and this spiky tail. And you can't see it in the icon here, but Odogaron has claws. It has 2 sets of claws on each limb, which is interesting. It normally has one set out on its hands and feet, and then when you make it mad, it flips out another set, which increases its attack power, and it also, the claws enable it to deal the bleed status effect. Odogaron is really cool addition to the cast. I like this monster a lot. It's very aggressive, very fast, and you have to be able to deal with its quick hits. Otherwise, you would get rolled pretty quickly. And I believe this is Matt's favorite monster. Rightfully so. Odogaron is cool. So I'm going to put you up here on high A tier. I'm going to put Odogaron kind of tied with Tigrex. This one, I don't know if it's as likely for it to return because it's tied to the environment of that Rotten Vale. this sort of rotting carcass area. That's where it roams. But if they wanted to, they could find a way to bring back this one. It's a very popular monster, so we'll see. In Iceborne, we had a subspecies for Odogaron as well. Might as well cover that. This is Ebony Odogaron. Basically, a slightly tweaked moveset, but instead of just a neutral non-element, this one deals dragon element. And so it's pretty interesting twists on the formula, but not a huge departure. But I do like its coloring and design a lot, so we're going to put Ebony down here on B tier. I feel like the original is a bit more iconic, hence being way up here in A tier, but the subspecies is fine. It changes the formula enough that we'll keep it in the B tier. Next up, we've got yet another newcomer to the franchise that debuted in World. This is Paolumu. Paolumu is a flying type wyvern, and it has a lot of design similarities and attributes like a mouse or a bat. It has these big sort of ears and kind of like a mouse-like face. And when you encounter Paolumu, it's just sort of roaming around. It flies, and once you actually engage it, it'll try and run you over. Its moveset's kind of similar to Rathian's, and it can breathe out these gusts of wind that can knock you over. When you make it mad, it'll inflate its neck sort of pouch into a big puffball, like a balloon. And then once it does that, it sort of free floats in the air and gets a bunch of new attacks that are a lot more dangerous. And it's a mid-tier monster, not too difficult, but I think its design is kind of cool. We'll put this one in low B tier. Now, its subspecies that introduced in Iceborne is fought in a different area and is not too different model-wise, but it's got a different color scheme and these sort of false eye spots. This is Nightshade Paolumu. Noteworthy thing, while the original one had no element, this one carries sleep ailment, which is not really an element. And so, in addition to having the puffball abilities, Nightshade could put you to sleep. It was much more dangerous. There would be clouds of sleep gas everywhere, so you'd have to be constantly dodging or you get put to sleep and get body slammed. I think Nightshade is fine. I'm going to rate it a little bit lower, just because it was annoying. Being put to sleep was not fun, but I do like its coloring. I like the spots. All right. Next up, we have another monster. A lot of these are unique to World. Not all of them. In fact, here's Rathalos. But there's a lot of new entries from World and Iceborne that are new in 5th generation. So I'm going to sound like a broken record when I say, here's a new monster, but there's a lot of them. So, Radobaan. Radobaan is a brute wyvern that debuted in World. And Radobaan is a cousin to Uragaan, who's already on the list. Where is Uragaan? Up here in C tier. And it has similar body type, but the main difference is Radobaan covers itself with bone armor and has kind of like a tar-like substance on its body that causes bones to stick to it. And so you're constantly breaking off bits of its armor. And it's kind of like a more edgy version of Uragaan, but they're very similar in moveset. I think the design for Radobaan is a little more interesting. Again, Uragaan is pretty average to me, but I do like the whole kind of bone armor idea and the fact that you can break all the stuff off of it. The fight-wise, difficulty-wise, is pretty mid-tier. It's like a mid-game target. Not too bad. I'd say Radobaan is pretty okay. Let's see. Next up, we have Rathalos. And I need to make a judgment call here because we're not all the way through the tier list, but we still have quite a few to go, and quite a few that have a lot to talk about. So, while originally I wanted to get through all this, I do have to go. I have some things I need to do this evening, including eating dinner. And if I keep going, it's going to be probably another hour to get through these last several. So while I don't want to delay getting this done, I'd rather finish up this tier list in another stream and then, do another one on top of it. So we'll finish with Rathalos here, and then these last several will be the rest of World, Iceborne, and then some additional inclusions down here that are sporadic entries from the other games I guess the creator missed. So again, we'll wrap up, but we will definitely finish this one off next time. There's a lot of ground to cover today, but that's all right. Not on a strict time schedule. So Rathalos, the poster child for Monster Hunter as a franchise, aka the creature that's probably been shown on the most boxes. Rathalos is more or less the de facto mascot for the series. And as a result, it's going to place above average. As a flying type wyvern, Rathalos, the king of the air or skies, spends a lot of time flying. Across all its iterations, it spent a lot of time in the air and then launching fireballs and lighting you up. It's gone through a lot of overhauls and tweaks. I think its version in Sunbreak is fine. Rise and Sunbreak, Rathalos is fine. It definitely spends a lot of time in the air, but not an obnoxious amount. Kind of goes back and forth. Again, nostalgia probably carries Rathalos through more than some of the other entries, but it wouldn't really be a Monster Hunter game without the poster child. So I don't think we'll ever see a game without it. I'd be surprised. But as long as they keep sort of iterating and updating the fight, then that's fine. Compared to the old versions of Rathalos, it's definitely been fine-tuned a lot more. And I think that's good. All right. So with that, we will wrap up the tier list discussion for today. If I didn't have to go take care of some other stuff, I probably could have pushed through. But again, this is probably about an hour's worth of discussion. We have some subspecies and variants and stuff in here. But rather than just blitz through all these, there's some on here I do have a lot to talk about. So we will make that a future discussion on tier lists. And maybe if I feel really ambitious, I can do like a one big supercut edit of all 3 sessions in case someone has 7 hours to kill and wants to listen to me talk about Monster Hunter all in one shot. Maybe I'll consider doing that in the future, but for now we will call this a to be continued. So let's see. I wonder who is online before we wrap up here. I know Wazi's live right now. She is currently doing art. Yep, it's Tuesday, so she's doing art. Let's see. Ooh, Lena is playing Monster Hunter. That would be on topic. Oh, Aaron Dwight is also live, and Aaron is playing Monster Hunter. Let's go raid Aaron. Yeah, we'll do that. So let me pause the BGM. Oh, I think I need to fix my playlist. Okay. So I'm going to pause the BGM, we'll go to outro, and then we will go commence the raid. So once again, thanks to all the folks who stopped by today. Again, these chill streams are a lot of discussion, but I do like talking about Monster Hunter. It's my favorite series. So thanks for tuning in and kind of hanging out while I talk at length about different monsters. We will finish this one in the future, but for now, we will go ahead and head over to Aaron. So thanks again for hanging out, and hope you folks have a good evening. Catch you in the next stream.